Hey guys, welcome back to Reignited and a poor man's Hellcat project. Now, it's been a minute since we've actually worked on our Magnum here, but it's finally time to yank that old tired 5.7 engine out of there and replace it with our refreshed 5.7 supercharged engine. Let's get into it. Now, anytime I'm pulling an engine on one of these vehicles, whether it be a Magnum, Challenger, Charger 300, anything like that, I always like to pull the hood. It's just 4 bolts. You got your one line for your washer nozzles. And in that same vein, you'll want to remove this whole cowl panel assembly right here. At first, it seems like, man, it's a lot of extra work, but it's really not. It's just a couple of minutes to remove some basic items to get this cowl panel out of the way. And it's absolutely essential because it allows you access to all of these components on the back side of the engine and also your upper bell housing bolts. Plus, you're not really going to be able to slip the engine out of there with this whole cowl panel in place. It's going to be way too tight, so just get rid of it. Now, those of you who've been watching my channel for a while will have heard me give this next tip before. However, it is so helpful, I like to give it as often as I can. Now, many times we have to remove the windshield wipers from our vehicle, but that can be a very difficult task because they have a tapered fit, so they get really stuck on there. So let's say you get the nut off and you're yanking on this thing and it just does not want to come off of there at all. Feels like you're gonna break something if you keep yanking on it to try to take it off of there. There's a very, very simple way to remove these that doesn't cost any money, doesn't take any sort of special tool at all. All you're trying to do is you're trying to break that tapered seal. So you basically just take the palm of your hand right here, put it at the portion of the wiper arm where it actually pivots and press down towards the windshield. And what that does is it provides extra leverage to break that tapered seal. So again, all you have to do is push down, it breaks that taper, and the wiper arm comes off. It is just that simple. Now, this trick works for wiper arms that have been on since the vehicle was built. So engine removal is something you've seen very often on my channel. I don't think I'm gonna go in depth on this particular video. This is all just disassembly. Let's get on with it. So a few hours of work later and we have our original engine out of our engine bay. Now, as much as I would love to take this engine that we have prepped for this project and just throw it right into this engine bay, unfortunately we can't do that right now. We're going to have to take a step backward before we can take a step forward. Let me explain why. Those of you who've been watching for a while will know that this engine is a 2006 block that we have swapped a set of Eagle cylinder heads on. Those are the cylinder heads from the 09 and up Hemi that are much freer flowing and can generate a lot more power. Unfortunately, they also increase the compression ratio by quite a substantial amount, which obviously is not really a great idea for a forced induction application. So I've been trying to brainstorm some ideas to help bring that compression ratio back under control. Now, one option is that Modern Muscle Extreme. They make 70 thousandths head gaskets for these things to really increase the size of that combustion chamber and decrease your compression ratio. I don't really like that idea though. Another option would be to install a set of Eagle pistons and rods in this engine. That will also help bring the compression ratio down, and that is a possibility. But I do believe I'm going to wimp out on this one and choose the third option. So here's my solution using another engine entirely. Yes, I am kind of wimping out on this one with the super high compression ratio. I thought it'd be easier just to start from a solid base here. Now, this is a somewhere between 13 to 17 model year Hemi 5.7 liter that I had lying around. And this one's going to provide us with some extra benefits. Not only does it have that stock compression ratio of 10.5 to 1, and it already has the upgraded Eagle cylinder heads on here, but I'll also be able to use my Hellcat oil pump, and I have a brand new SRT 6.4 liter camshaft that I can put in here to upgrade this versus the stock 5.7 over here, which just has a stock camshaft in that one. So some upgrades to come with that. However, there is going to be some modification necessary to software programming because these engines have a different crankshaft tone wheel on them. So I am using HP tuners on this project. I've never used it before. I believe I can change all those settings in there, make this thing run just fine. I need to do some research on that, but I'm pretty sure that's all gonna work out. Probably shouldn't be a big deal. Now, another benefit of this is that my timing cover will actually work perfectly on this engine as well. but my crankshaft damper will also fit up perfectly. Now, if I were to continue to use this engine, I would have had to make a spacer that goes between the oil pump housing and the actual crankshaft damper. Using this engine, I don't have to do that. That's one less thing that I have to do. So as you guys know, with this engine, we went ahead and gapped the piston rings in there to prepare it for boost. So we're gonna have to do the exact same thing to this engine. So like I said, a little bit of a step backwards here. We gotta tear this engine down, pull those pistons out, gap the new rings that I have, clean up those cylinder walls, and reassemble this whole engine. But honestly, I think this will be the smarter solution in the end. Let's get after it. The first order of business is to take this engine back apart because I do want to take some of the components out of it. We put those non-MDS lifters in there. We have the MDS block off plugs here. We want to take all of that and swap that over to this engine. Okay, we have our new donor engine torn down to just the bare long block here. Now, I get asked all the time, where do I get my engines from? Well, as you can see, they're not exactly new. These things are usually pretty rough looking. And one of the benefits of actually working for a Dodge dealer is I kind of have first dibs on buying core engines, basically engines that have some sort of problem with them that are then replaced with a new engine. I can purchase the original engine for a very cheap cost, in my opinion, because generally I can replace or repair whatever was actually bad with these engines and then use them in my own projects. So that's the way I like to go about it. Now, this particular engine is going to be an interesting case study. I'm kind of interested to see what I find because the customer stated that there was a ticking noise in the engine, more than likely a cam or lifter issue. However, he didn't even want to tear it down to find out. He just wanted a new engine put in. So another technician did the job. He put the engine in, said, hey, you might want to take a look at this one. It might be right up your alley. So I went ahead and bought it. I don't even know what I'm going to find. Let's go ahead and pull these cylinder heads off and see what the cam and lifters look like in this thing. Still no signs of a failed lifter yet. One more set. Definitely have signs of wear on the rollers themselves, but the lifters have not actually failed. Yeah, that's it. Still no actual failed lifters on this engine. Yeah, wow, I'm not seeing even a hint of cam and lifter failure on this thing, so yeah, feel kind of bad for the guy who had his engine replaced, but yeah, at least he's got a new one. Well, I gotta say, everything's looking pretty good with this engine so far. All the cylinders look fantastic. I'm gonna go ahead and knock out these pistons and rods, get them cleaned up, ready for the new rings to go in. Go ahead and clean up these cylinders, give them a quick hone, just to clean them up a little bit, ready for those new piston rings, and then we'll start putting everything back together again. Holy cow, sometimes I forget just how long it takes to actually prep everything for reassembly here. So as you can see, got everything all disassembled, was at the parts washer for hours cleaning all this stuff up, a ton of brake cleaner, but I think we're finally ready to start going back together. Just got things basically cleaned up well enough to get this thing together. It's gonna be a nice solid engine for us. Now again, as I mentioned, I do have this brand spanking new 6.4 liter SRT camshaft I'm gonna put in this 5.7. I know it works because I've done it before with my budget Challenger. If you haven't watched that before, I'll put a link to that down below. You can check that out. Now, if you're interested in learning how to time your Hemi engine, I have two really good videos about this. I'll go ahead and link to those in the description below as well. So we're back to filing our ring end gaps. Now, I looked this up last time I did the other engine build, and basically what I'm going with is a 25 thousandths gap for both the upper and the secondary ring, basically both compression rings on there. That seemed to be a general consensus of a number that would work fairly well for forced induction, so that's what I'm going with, 25 thousandths. Now, It's not a very difficult process here, but it's definitely one you want to sneak up on. Basically fit it into the cylinder, go ahead and push the ring down with the top side of a piston to make sure it's completely level, because if it's not level, your measurements won't be right. Measure the gap and then go ahead and get to grinding it. Now this grinding wheel that I have is just a cheap Amazon deal, but it seems to do the job. Like I said, you want to sneak up on it, especially if you're using a drill like I am. Grind a little, test it again, grind a little, test again until you get the number you're after. Then you just go around and do all 8 cylinders. Now, one thing you do want to do is make sure that each set of piston rings that you're doing is specific to that cylinder, because there can be variances between the cylinders even though there's not actually supposed to be. As a final step, I usually like to take a fine file and clean up the edges of the edge of the ring that I was using on the grinder, just to clean it up a little bit, because there are going to be some burrs on there and you don't want that in your cylinders. But now we've got all our piston rings filed to fit, let's go ahead and get these things loaded on the pistons and get these pistons and rods back in this engine. So as we're slipping our piston and rods back into the engine, one thing we want to make sure of is that these cylinder walls are well lubricated with fresh engine oil. Now I'm also going to be using one of my favorite tools that I have. This is a Wiseco tapered piston installer. Essentially, they got this from like the automatic transmission world, where this is a tapered fit inside here. So as you push the piston down in there, the piston rings will then compress and it slides right into place. This is so much simpler than using one of those Napa brand style clicking ratcheting style, which they do work, but they can be a real fight sometimes. So a tool like this is really a novelty. Let me go ahead and give you the part number here. So the one thing about a tool like this is that it is specific to one particular size. In this case, it is particular to the 99.5-inch bore of a stock 5.7 liter Hemi. So it's only useful on these engines. But as you guys can tell, I work on these quite a bit, so it makes a lot of sense for me to have one of these. Now I also have the same tool for the 6.4 liter. I'll go ahead and put that part number on the screen right now. Now, as I'm sure you can tell, this isn't really a how-to video on how to assemble an engine. I'm skipping a lot of steps here, like things like piston ring orientation, torquing procedures, all that kind of stuff. If you want to see more detailed procedures on how to reassemble a Hemi engine, I have a ton of playlists on my channel. You can go watch those for more specific information. In this particular video, we're just trying to get this thing back together so we can get it dropped into the Magnum. All right, we gotta make sure to torque these rod bolts right now. We don't wanna lose an engine like Boosted Boy Kyle. So with our rotating assembly in place, what we wanna do is spin the engine over a number of times. Make sure you don't feel any hard spots. Make sure everything is moving smoothly as it should be. Right now, obviously there's no compression happening in these cylinders, so this thing should move free and easy, and it does, so we're good to move on to the next step. Time to install the Hellcat oil pump, which is nice because on this engine, it's just a direct bolt on. There we go. Wow, what a battle just to get back to the same point we were at when we started this episode. But I still think that this is absolutely the right decision to make. I think we're gonna be far better off using this engine. Unfortunately, we're going to have to wait until the next episode to get this thing into the car. I am flat wiped out. I have been working extra overtime here. I'm beat. We'll see you guys next time on Reignited.